What is up, everybody? This is the Wild Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Heskett, and this is episode 59. Today's guest is Chase Smith. I'm super excited to have him as the guest today. I've wanted him as a guest for a little while now. You're going to love him. So, Chase is the COO and assistant coach of Conquer Fitness and Nutrition. He used to be 400 pounds himself before losing his weight, going through his journey, and now is a coach. So he's lost over 100 pounds. And while his journey hasn't been easy and he's had lots of ups and downs, he's continued to look forward to the next goal ahead. And basically, he completely changed his life, and he left his nursing career to pursue coaching full time to help others reach their full potential as a coach. He's also a power lifter, which is a cool thing about him, and he's done a lot of other things. So, without further ado, I've talked long enough. Let's get into this interview. What's up, Chase? How's it going?
Doing well, man. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm great. So, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you became a coach.
Yeah, so it's I'll try to keep this as short as I can because I feel like this story ends up getting a little bit longer every time I tell it. But basically, in a nutshell here, I always like to say my journey technically started in 2019, but as we all know, like there was a journey to get to the start of their journey, right? So like, I've always been that bigger kid growing up, really struggled with my weight my entire life, basically. I remember first like trying to look at like some sort of dieting attempt around like when I was like 12 or 13 years old. My mom had bought some Nutrisystem for herself. So not for me. I always have to clarify. It wasn't like she was like trying to get me on Nutrisystem, but she had bought it. And I was just like, so you eat these meals and you lose weight. Interesting. Well, I want to lose weight. So I ate those meals. They taste like cardboard and stopped doing that really quick. And then, so, kind of like looking forward, like every year it was the same thing over and over. Every January 1st was like, this is the year I'm going to do it this year. And it just be a flop every year. I'd try whatever the fad diet was at the time. And so finally, fast forward, 2015, I became a nurse. And so, that added a lot of stress to nursing school, and just being a nurse in general was not coping healthy. It's all coping through food. And up until 2019, I was almost 400 pounds at that point. And a friend and coworker at the time when I was working at the state psychiatric hospital, one of the coworkers said, "Hey, like, I know you want to lose weight. I want to lose weight as well. How about we do a challenge with each other?" And I was like, okay, sure. Like, let's just do it. Like, I honestly at the time I thought it was just gonna be another fad diet attempt. Like, same thing as always, lose some, gain it all back and more. Started with intermittent fasting that very first time. We're with her, and just because that was like the thing at the time in 2019. I lasted about 2 months on that, realized, all right, I don't have to do this. This is when I started learning more about nutrition. Which I always like to say, it's funny because I actually took a whole nutrition course as a prerequisite for nursing school, and absolutely hated it, which is funny now that I'm a nutrition coach. But at that time, I didn't care about nutrition. It was not important to me, prioritizing health. Other people's health, of course, but not myself. And so started to learn more about that. Also met a coach about that time in April of 2019. Did not start working with him until August that year. But he helped me all throughout the summer, was seeing great results, eventually kind of hit like a quote unquote plateau at that point. And so I was like, all right, and he reached out to me again. I was like, hey, I think we could really help you through this, get you that next step. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So I hired him in August 2019. I've been working with the coach ever since. And by the end of the year, we'd lost over 100 pounds, was feeling amazing. And then just next year started getting more into strength training. Like I started strength training in the very beginning, but it was more so like just the machines and things like that. But I started learning more about like dumbbell work, free weights, barbells, things like that. Ended up hiring a personal trainer because my coach was just doing nutrition, and brought him on board. And then eventually he took over my nutrition as well. Fast forward, started travel nursing through 2021, working in the ER, had a relapse at binge eating actually during that time as well. Had to work through a lot of that struggle. And then fast forwarding again into 2022, I most recently got into powerlifting about a year ago. And that's been my new fun thing to do. For now, my next goal that I've been shooting for is just powerlifting. I just competed for the first time in April, and actually I just signed up yesterday for my next meet in September.
Nice.
But that's where I'm at now.
Awesome. So how did you become a coach? Go from nursing to
Yes.
coach?
Yes, that's right. You did ask that. But so I got into coaching basically. I mean, like, as you know, as I just shared with my entire story, like I had my own transformation working with a coach, and I started to realize like what a coach meant to me. And at one point, a lot of friends, family, coworkers are asking like, how are you doing this? Like, obviously they're seeing the transformation that I'm going through, losing all the weight and creating this new lifestyle for myself. And everyone's asking me, how'd you do it? I just started helping people, like, just as a friend, like, hey, yeah, like, count on my calories and do this, do that, and just simple stuff. And at one point my coach was like, at one point this could be a job for something you do, like you actually make it official and actually help people, coach people. And I was like, yeah, probably good. And just kind of blew it off, like whatever. And then it kept happening more and more. And he was like, like you really could do this. And so I was like, all right, like, who'd you get your nutrition coaching certification through? And that's when he brought up NCI. And so I ended up looking into that. In June 2020, I went through the certification and got certified for nutrition, took on my, couple test clients and loved it, and started just kind of building like a little side gig while I was nursing. I was nursing, like I said, since 2015, worked all through the pandemic in the ER and just doing a lot of that different stuff. And then eventually at some point it was like, I started bringing up a bigger roster and I started becoming more fulfilled with coaching than I was nursing. Like I love nursing, don't get me wrong. And it always holds a special place in my heart. And I'm still a registered nurse. I haven't let the license go, but it's just at some point it was like I was I would see patients almost coming in and I was like, they're on the ER stretcher in front of me, and I'm just like, man, what could have happened if like you had a coach or something like that in your corner like years ago before you got to where I'm at? Like obviously there are some patients in the ER that are there for like, things that are outside of their control, like traumas or things like that. But we had a lot of those chronic illnesses coming in our door that just like all of this is preventable. Like all of this, like if you had just taken your health control of your health years ago, you would not be on the stretcher in front of me right now, at least for this reason. And so I started thinking like more about like, man, like there's so much more impact I could have as a coach rather than a nurse. Like I can help, people in the moment and help them during their hardest days in the ER. But as a coach, I can help so many more people with that. And so I started to build up my roster more. And then actually last April, after coaching con, I got back and I worked a couple shifts. And to be honest, like it was like probably the three worst shifts I'd had working in the ER nursing since then. It just was like it was that final push. It was like, yes. And actually when I left coaching con, I had said, all right, by June 1st, I would leave nursing. But I worked those three shifts when I got back and I was like, this is miserable. Like I was just like, I like and not that again from a bad point. It was just like it was like that push I needed to finally say, like, this is what you need to do. And so at that moment, I put in my notice and I was done. I left
Nice.
nursing. I was travel nursing at the time. I was down in Georgia on an assignment and I left and I was like, all right, let's do this. And took my business on full time. And then most recently, as we were chatting off air before we hit record, I merged with another business now.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So when you lost weight, how much weight did you actually lose? Because you were almost 400.
Yeah. So it was like somewhere a little over 100 pounds.
Nice. That's no small feat.
No.
um, and my wife's a nurse, so I hear all the struggles there, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
not an easy career.
Not at all.
No, the shit you guys have to deal with each day, and like you said, like she would tell me stories. I'm like, if the same things you said, if it was like a decade or 2 decades earlier, they just started taking their health seriously, they wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be in this positions where my wife's seeing them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I always say like and I do like to stress it's never too late. I mean, like I definitely have a few older women on my team in their 60s and 70s that, they have a lot of chronic health conditions, but we've been able to, basically rid them from those health conditions through diet and exercise, losing 70, 80 pounds and getting their health back. So like it's never too late. But I do think that if people need to start taking it a little more seriously in earlier stages of life, that way they're not getting to where they're at later on.
I just listened to someone, I forget where I was, but it literally happened yesterday. It brings us up to this topic. He's like, I have clients from like 26 to 81, and the everyone who's like older, the one thing they wish they did was when they were in their 20s and 30s, they would have gotten a coach or a mentor or someone and taken their health seriously. It's like we ignore it and like, oh, we'll push it off. And it's kind of, I always, and I'm sure you'd say it's always an investment and it's going to pay off in the long run, just like a
Yes.
401k, like you put money in now so you can pull it out later on. You pay the dues now with your health so that later on you don't have to deal with those chronic health issues.
Yeah. And I always like to say, I mean, like, can you even put a price tag on health? Right. Like,
No.
I mean, like there's, and I'm not even going to try to say the quote because I know I'll butcher it, but basically it's along the lines of like someone said once, like, health is wealth. And, when you're sick and when you're dying, I actually think it was something like when Nick Ross shared about like his cancer story. He said like when he was unhealthy and by fighting cancer, like the one thing he wanted was his health back. And people would pay. I mean, like, think about it that way. Think about it like if you had cancer. I mean, God forbid you had cancer or any other just chronic health conditions. Like, if you could walk into a store and swipe your credit card and get amazing health and no longer struggle with any of that again, people would probably pay whatever it took to do that, right? So like, I always tell people like, why are we even putting a dollar amount on your health? It literally is going to save you so much effort, time, struggles, and give you so much more life back.
Yep. Well, you were there coaching con 2 years ago. So I'm sure, do you remember John Berardi's presentation?
Yes. And not like
So
not word for word, but like I do remember him speaking.
yeah, I remember. So the gist of it that I remember. So to the audience listening, if you're like, well, if it was so much easier, I would totally do it. And what he brought up was if there's a magic pill that gave you instant health, people wouldn't take it. Like even if it was affordable and everything. So when they did a study on life-saving medications, like medications that keep people alive, and the compliance rate was 50%. Like you don't take
That's
this,
right.
you will die.
Yeah.
Compliance was 50%. So it's one of those things when we're talking about investing in your health comes with lifestyle change, which I'm sure we're going to get into with today's podcast, but you can't just like buy it. Like you can't wait around for a magic pill because even if it existed, which it never will, you probably like flip of coin 50% chance you would never actually take it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, it just all comes back to like people need to understand like, what's a priority to them? Like, what do they actually want out of life? And, it's going to come down to, are you happy with where you're at right now? And if you're not, what are you willing to do to make that change?
Yeah, exactly. So with when was that moment for you where you wanted to make that change? Like was there like one defining moment? I obviously you did the challenge with your coworker, but kind of what was it that made you stick with it?
Yeah, so obviously she was the one that started. I always like to give her credit. My friend Brandy, she was the one that like kickstarted this all, and who knows where I would be even if it wasn't for her. Honestly, right? I mean, like you just never know. I mean, like I always say things happen for a reason, and sure I could have done this, but like that was the epiphany moment that like it was like, all right, let's do this. And then I think just I started seeing a lot of really great progress in the very beginning. Because I mean, to be honest, and I always like to be completely transparent with this, like I was definitely under eating way more than I should have when I first started, just out of lack of I didn't know. Like I
Mhm.
just I was eating clean, I was eating, just all the healthy foods. I never ate fast food. I wasn't like drinking alcohol hardly at all. Like I was very eating quote unquote healthy. And when I actually started tracking calories, I was probably only eating like 1,600 calories at 400 pounds, right? So like
Yeah.
no wonder I dropped so much weight so quick.
And an active job.
Yeah, exactly, and a very active job. So with that being said, I think seeing a lot of great results in the very beginning is what helped. And actually, this is something where I had Jordan Syed on my show a while back, and one thing that I brought that up because I was like, people hate on really fast results and whether or not that's helpful. And he actually said there's actually some studies going out now that are showing that yes, we have to make sure it's sustainable in the long run, but those who need to lose over 100 pounds, it probably does them good to see a lot of great progress in the beginning because it builds that momentum and wants to keep them going. Because think about it this way: if the mountain ahead of you is 150 pounds weight loss and you're losing 2 pounds, the first month, someone who needs to lose 10 pounds, that's amazing. Someone needs 150, that's like, what, did I lose that on my big toe? Like, I mean, like, where did that weight
Right.
come from? Like, it's nothing. So there definitely is some, I think benefit from when I lost a lot so quickly. That said, obviously you need to, that's when my coach stepped in and was like, hey, we start increasing calories back up. And, by the end of the year, I was, hanging around like 2,500 calories, and, feeling much better. But I think just seeing a lot of the great results was like the moment when I was like, this is actually possible. Like I can actually do this. And I always love to say like my one big epiphany moment of my journey in at least the first couple of months was about 6 months in. I was at a work party and they were throwing a going away party. I was switching to another, switching from psych to ER nursing, and they were throwing a party for me, and they brought in tons of great food and all this. And I ate like one plate, then I went back for a second plate, then went back for a third plate. And then like it was like, they brought out all the desserts, and I'm like, have a piece of cake, have a cupcake, have this ice cream, have this, have that. And the next thing you know, I'm just like, I'm leaving work that day. I'm just like, I just ruined it all. Like this is done. Like, all the negative thoughts coming into my head, like, this is, I knew I couldn't do this. I'm a failure. You do this to yourself every single year. Just like, self-sabotage basically kind of creeping in. It felt like, and then so I messaged he wasn't my coach at the time, but I messaged him and I was like, hey man, I screwed this all up. Like, this is what I did. I just ate way too much. And he was like, great. Did you enjoy it? And I was like, yeah, it was really good. That's why I ate so much of it. And he was like, awesome. Glad you enjoyed it. Now let's just get back into our normal routine tomorrow. Get back on track tomorrow. And for some reason, like it was like, it sounds so obvious, but I feel like it's just one of those things where it was like, duh. Like
Mhm.
that's all it takes. It's just getting back on track tomorrow. Like those things are gonna happen. Like it was a special work event. It's good food and great company that I was with. And so it was like, great, you enjoyed it. Just get back on track tomorrow. And for some reason, like it was that epiphany moment for me that I was just like, I really can't screw this up. And so I think that's just like when I like from that time moving forward, it was just like no matter what happens, I could have the worst day, week, month. I've had them all. I can have those and it's okay. And I can just get right back at it.
Yeah, I can't tell you. I'm sure you with clients too. Like, how many times have we had that conversation with them where it's like, oh my God, I was so bad. It was the holiday family that came into town I haven't seen all year, and I ate so many plates of food. Like, cool. Like, did you enjoy it? Yeah. Are you going to do it tomorrow? No. Okay. Like, yeah, the scale's going to be up. You're going to retain water weight. Probably let's skip the scale to like Friday this week,
Yeah.
and or altogether, and we'll get back. Like, we'll check the scale the following week, but just get back on your plan tomorrow. Like, but that the emotions that go through your head are where a lot of people struggle. It's like you said,
Mhm.
it's so simple. Just how can you screw up 6 days in one day with one meal, but
Mhm.
those thoughts creep into your head like, oh, I'm a failure, I fucked up, I suck. It's like, no, no, you're fine.
Yeah, and then that's something. I mean, I even started telling clients recently. I've even kind of changed a little bit of the terminology, and I no longer like to even say getting back on track because I explain to people, this journey is a roller coaster, so it has its ups and downs all throughout the way. So think about a roller coaster. It goes up, you're doing really well, and it goes back down, and it doesn't go off the track, hopefully. So like, you're still on the track. You're just having a down moment, but it's going to go back up. And so if you look at it as like that's a part of the track. You're supposed to be able to go into, enjoy a slice of grandma's pie that you get once a year during Christmas. You're supposed to be able to eat some Halloween candy with your kids at Halloween time. You're supposed to be able to go out and have an anniversary or a date night with your loved one, significant other, and not feel like you're ruining all your progress. Like that's a part of the track. It's just one of those downward motions. I'm going to go right back up the next day.
Yep. And there's strategies you can work around it, but sometimes
For
it's
sure.
like all day events. Like, there's no way you're going to necessarily like work around it. It's just like,
Yeah,
go
for
enjoy
sure.
it.
For sure. And I'm not even really referring to the ones that we can work around. Like those, like, yes, like I agree that there are some that's like, all right, if you're having, if you're having a week where it's like 10 events going on that week, all right, we probably have to pick and choose which ones we're gonna stick to our routine. But if you have like the once a year thing, like I said, the grandma's slice of pie that you love, and it's gonna put you over your calories a day, enjoy it. Like, life is not all about counting calories. Life is not all about weight loss. You are more than just what the number on the scale says. Enjoy your life and stop making yourself so miserable day by day, but after day, focusing so much on what the number on the scale says. Your life is so much more than that.
Yeah. I always say, like, I like getting clients to intuitive eating after they're like out of the dieting phase. Like, they're done dieting, they've reversed diet. And now it's like, let's get rid of my fitness pal or chronometer, macros first, whatever you're using. Like, let's take a break from that, because I personally hate doing it all the time. Like, I despise it. It gets me great results, but I'm like, oh my God, just like clients, like after a while, you're like, I don't want to track. So it's very temporary. And I think a lot of people, I've had this conversation with clients multiple times where people are like, I just feel like this is going to be the rest of my life. It's like, no, it's going to be the next 16 weeks of your life. And then we're going to be done with your fat loss phase, or we're taking a break. We're going to like not track as much. And then if you ever need to lose weight in the future, you bring the app back out, you start tracking, you lose like the 5 or 10 pounds you gain after the holidays, you gain the fluffy 5, and then you just get that back off.
Yeah. And I always like to use the analogy with clients about like, it's like training wheels for a bike, basically. For the first little bit, you need to wear, I mean, I've never seen a kid be able to just hop on a bike and when they're
No.
3 years old and just take off without training wheels, right? So like, and so that's why some people be like, oh, I'm just intuitively eating. You don't know how, and I will argue with people, you don't know how to intuitively eat until you've actually seen what you're eating.
Yes,
you have to have that first. So I always tell people, put the training wheels on the bike, learn how to ride the bike, and then eventually we can start taking the training wheels off. All right, maybe you crash a couple times. Like, all right, let me put the training wheels back on for a little bit. I'm not ready to take them off just yet. Cool, no worries. Same thing if you stop tracking and you're like, you start putting some weight on. All right, I don't have great intuitive eating skills just yet. Let me put the training wheels back on. Let me start tracking again. And then the beauty of all this is, like you said, like if you are going throughout the year and you're maintaining, and then you do have that time when it goes back up. All right, cool. You always have the training wheels in storage. You can always pull them back out and throw them back on the bike if you need to, but they're always there for you. But you have to start with them first and learn how to ride the bike without them. But know that once you take them off, it doesn't mean you have to take them off forever. They're always there for you.
Yeah, I agree. I see coaches that are like, our approach is intuitive eating. Like, how can you teach them intuitive eating when the best nutrition education, in my opinion, for the average person is tracking your food. Like,
yeah,
you can like go on and Google like random nutrition stuff, but you want to know the best way to learn like calories, vitamins, macros in the foods you eat every single day. It's just plug it into like Chronometer or macros first or MyFit, whatever free app you want to use. Like, that's the best nutrition education you can get started with. And then once you know portion control and everything, then you can move to intuitive eating because you understand it. But before that, you're just like, peanut butter is a protein, right? I need more protein in my diet. You're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. I always tell people it's a sad day when you realize what an actual serving looks like of peanut butter.
It's a very sad day. I mean, and I still like, as myself as a coach, I still have to spot check myself every once in a while. Like, no, that's 2 servings of peanut butter. That was not 1. Crap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the other thing I'll teach people with my intuitive eating approach is like, generally as a human, we want to always try to put on body fat. So our tendency is always to go with slightly larger portions. Yeah, that looks about 4 ounces. It's not 3, it's 5. Hey, that looks like it's a half cup. Yeah, it's more like 2/3, not a third. So
exactly,
you have to spot check yourself every once in a while too.
Yep, exactly. And I always tell people too, like, I mean, there are other methods. And like you said, tracking calories is going to be the most accurate, the most efficient, and the fastest way to learn and get your results. But like, I've had some clients that just, we've given it a shot and it's just not for them. So I'm not saying like you can still see results without it, but you're leaving a lot of your results up to chance, and you're gonna have to, and it's gonna be a much slower approach, and you have to learn. You're gonna have to be a lot more intentional. Like there's like the precision nutrition,
Mhm.
hand method of like portion sizing,
Yep.
and like there's you can ability to plate a certain way. I mean, there are other alternatives. I just explain to clients like, hey, we can do this other route, but just know like it's gonna probably take us a little bit longer to get your results.
Yep. We use the precision nutrition hand method with people,
Yep.
especially if they're like brand new. Like it's a great like starting off point where maybe it's not as overwhelming. Like just do this. Don't worry about using another app and trying to get your workouts in and trying to get your steps in and
Mhm.
trying to like cut out like let's just start with that. But then usually like we transfer to tracking macros at some point. But it's always a fallback too. Like, hey, we're not quite ready for intuitive eating. We're gonna fall back to that precision nutrition hand method.
Exactly.
So one thing you have here you wanted to talk about, and something I talk about all the time on Facebook is playing the long game. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I think just playing a long game means like really taking the deadline off of all of this. I feel like a lot of people, when we start this goal, it's like, I need to lose X amount of weight in 6 months. I need to lose X amount of weight in a year. And I always tell people, like, really, the only time you should ever have any sort of deadline for yourself is if, like, okay, like if you have a wedding coming up or something like that, like that's a little bit different. But for the general person who has been struggling with their weight for the entire lifetime, you know, we don't need to set any type of deadline for yourself. Like, so first, remove the timeline, remove the deadline for yourself, and realize that this is going to take time. If you've been trying to chronically diet, and yo-yo dieting and all these things for 20, 30, 40 years, some people, then we can't expect this to all come off in, 3 weeks, even 3 months, even 6 months. It's going to take some time. Um, so I think it's just that's one of the first things I always like to talk about with the long game is like realizing this is going to take some time. It's going to take some effort, but also realize like this doesn't have to take over your entire life, right? Like and this is again where it comes back down to depending on what your goals are. And I'm speaking of again the general client who's just looking to get healthier
Mhm.
and focus on longevity. If you have aesthetic goals, like, trying to step on a bodybuilding show stage, or if you're, performance goals, getting like ready for like a CrossFit competition or a powerlifting competition, like that's a little bit different. But for the general person, we need to just take this low and slow and just learn how to build this really strong foundation for yourself. Because the people who are getting ready to step on a bodybuilding stage, they're not going to live like that the rest of their life. They're doing something to reach an aesthetic goal to help them maintain that for that period of time. And they know they're going to gain some weight back afterwards. There's that always that rebound there.
Yeah.
But if someone who's focused on longevity, we need to focus on that foundation and really focus on building a really strong foundation for them. And I always use the analogy of like, think about it this way. If we're building like a multi-million dollar mansion and we can make it look as nice as we can, but let's say we kind of rush on the foundation because we want to get we want to get the house up and make
Mhm.
it look all nice. You can spend 2 years building this house and making it look the best it has ever been. But if you didn't put effort into the foundation, it's probably going to come crumbling back down within a couple of weeks or months or a year.
Yeah.
Versus, and same with your results. If you are not taking the time to build in your foundation, your steps, your water, your sleep, your stress management, your protein intake, strength training, all of those things, if we're not taking effort and putting all that into a very strong foundation of a baseline for yourself, then the results you obtain are probably not going to be sustainable.
Right.
And so we need to make sure we're building that really strong foundation so then your results will last forever. So that's like the biggest thing that I would say with it comes to playing the long game with this is remove the timeline and make sure we're building a strong foundation for yourself so that this can be sustainable long term.
Yeah, so listeners are going to be very familiar if this is not the first episode with the foundations you just said, because we call them the core four in our program. It's
Okay.
movement, water, sleep, and then stress management. It's like that, or sorry, not stress man, protein.
Yep.
Protein at each meal, and then stress management's along with that. So it's like, yeah, that's same shit.
I mean,
You gotta
it's
do
it's
that stuff.
it's the boring stuff, right? It's
Yeah.
not sexy. It doesn't. It's not like some bright shiny object. It doesn't have the fancy labels, the fancy names. It's the boring stuff that really people are like, okay, it's nothing. It's not a supplement I can take. It's not like a cleanse or a detox I can do. Like it's just the boring work, right? Like, I mean, I know our business mentors talk about all the time doing the
Mhm.
boring work. Same thing with like your diet. Like you have to do this boring work, the things that you think are going to make that make a difference. And right, like the one, and this is what differentiates something where I was explaining to people if you can do something and not see results in it in one day, it's probably a good thing to do. For example, if you drink your water one day, it's not going to really change much. You do one strength training workout, it's probably not going to change very much. You hit your protein goal or go over your protein goal one day, probably not going to change very much. But if we stack months and years on that, you're going to see phenomenal results.
Mhm.
Versus if you do a detox, sure, you might lose a couple pounds in one day. If you take, a supplement of some sort that makes you, basically a laxative, of course you're going to see results the next day. So if you're seeing those instant results, more than likely it's probably not something sustainable. So let's look for those things that are the really boring things that you're not going to see the results right away with, but they're compounding. And the more consistent you are with them, the better results you're going to get.
Yeah, definitely. The quick detox cleanses, things like that, they do not work long term. And people spend a ridiculous amount of money. I had someone I was in the DMs with, and she messaged me like, I'm doing this like 3-day metabolic reset. And she sent me these pills. I like looked them up, like, will not work at all. By the way, if something like this actually worked, guys, um, we would all be using it because it would work so well. But
Exactly.
it was like $149 for this 3-day thing of supplements. It was like
Wow.
3 different pill packs. And like, you spent this much money for 3 days worth of pills that won't work. Like, if that stuff actually worked, it'd be all over the news headlines, like magical, like the semi-glutide. Like, that's actually because that actually works. There's a lot of nuance there, and a lot of people have their opinions on it. But hey, like, this seems to be working. National news, a supplement. This is the secret supplement from the Himalayas that will make you lose weight. No,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah. Exactly.
So something a lot of people struggle with, and you brought up, is some of the binge eating stuff. So what can you do? What do you coach your clients through to help overcome that?
Yeah. So whenever we look at binge eating, I think first it's really important to identify why it's happening, right? Like I mean, if we look at anything we're doing as coaches, like it's all about create awareness first, figure out why something's happening. Because unless you know why it's happening and put that problem right in front of you and create that awareness, you're never going to get to where you need to be at because you're just going to be shooting, shots in the dark, basically. So we need to first create awareness and figure out why we're binge eating. And it usually comes down to 4 different reasons, two of which are a little bit harder to control, and two of which are easier per se, but it still requires some effort. So number one, and these are no specific order. Number one would be identity, and this is something where I see a lot of times people, first I think, and actually, like I should even preface this whole conversation of like, what is binge eating, right? Like, because I feel like some people, and this ties into the identity piece, is a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a binge eater," or "I binge eat all the time," or "Oh, I binge ate last night." Guys, we need to be careful of what we're actually labeling as binge eating versus what is just overeating. And so binge eating is actually when you're losing control of your ability to stop yourself from eating, basically. That's my easiest basic definition to give
Yeah.
people. And so like, I always use the example, like binge eating might be like going to the store and getting like, a pint of ice cream and 3 packs of cookies and, 2 bags of gummy bears or whatever it be, like, and just going home and eating, and maybe you eat the first bag of gummy bears and you're like, ugh, I'm just not feeling good, but then you just keep eating until you are absolutely miserable and you just can't turn that switch off. That is more like binge eating. And binge eating disorder is even a little bit different because that means it has to be a consecutive amount of days or weeks. I don't know all the exact numbers, but that is actually like a diagnosis, a clinical diagnosis. And then we look at overeating. Overeating is something like if you get home from work and let's say your boss was a jerk to you at work today, and you get home and you're just like, oh, I just don't even want to cook dinner tonight. I'm just having ice cream, and you eat the whole pint of ice cream. That's not binge eating. That's more so like you had a choice. Like you're just like, screw it, I don't care. I'm gonna have some ice cream tonight, and you end up eating more than you probably would have. Right. Like that's an overeating episode. And the reason I bring this up is because of that identity piece. If you were someone who says I'm a binge eater rather than I binge eat, you're already putting that label on yourself, and you're going to continue to show up as that person who binge eats. And so we need to be really careful of how we're wording those things to ourselves and taking out that binge eater part, though, in an ER, or even an overeater, and looking at it as like I overeat or I overate or I binged ate. And really changing up that wording, because again, the more how you speak to yourself is a lot stronger than most people give respect to, and it's actually going to influence your actions and behaviors.
Yes.
So that's number one, is identity. Secondly is undereating. And this is one, like if you're someone who's eating, 1,000, 1,200 calories, you're gonna probably struggle to eat that so long. That's why I like a lot of people like, and I know there's a lot of mixed messaging out there right now, and about like, people say like ruin our metabolism and things like that when it comes to like under eating. And yes, that's true, but a lot of times what's happening, people actually aren't under eating the entire time. They're probably eating 1,200 calories Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends they're so hungry and they're going out of town, or and they just throw their hands up in the air, say fuck it, and then end up eating 3,000 calories each day. So then your overall average is now higher, but you're working so hard to eat 1,000, 1,200 calories throughout the week that your brain is pretty much telling yourself that you're eating 1,200 calories all the time. And you almost forget, and it's not intentional. Like guys, like I get like, and I've had to have this tough conversation with clients. And once we talk through it more, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I am having a lot more on the weekends. And then it's just like your brain just like phases it out, and it would rather focus on how hard you're working the diet throughout the week. So that's one of the easier fix ones that you can just, and again, easy is, not relative. Always, it's easier said than done. Exactly relative. And so we need to start working our calories up. And I'd rather you have a consistent 1,700 calories a day and be able to focus on that 7 days a week, rather than 1,200 Monday through Friday and then 3 or 3,500 on the weekends. Number three would be restriction. And this comes down to anytime we're restricting ourselves of any type of like food group or certain specific foods. So people who are, as you saying, I can't have carbs, I can't have fat, I can't have, let's say somebody says I can't have donuts, whatever it be. If you're restricting yourself of that all the time, you may do really good about keeping yourself away from it all the time. But let's say you have the one day when, like, let's say your significant other brings home donuts one morning for breakfast, for you and the kids, and you're like, oh, I don't eat donuts. The donuts are bad. They're carbs. I can't have them. And you push it off, and then eventually you end up just whatever. And again, having way too many. So we kind of lose that willpower, and I'll talk about willpower in a moment, but we lose that willpower after so long, and just kind of end up caving and having whatever food we say we can't have. And that goes back to that good and bad food mentality. If you're saying you can't ever have the bad foods, quote unquote, then you're going to end up struggling trying to maintain that, the one time you do get your hands on the donut. And even if you allow yourself to have it, you're going to feel guilty and shameful. So then you're going to have having 10 times more than you would have. And then emotion is the last one. This is the really big one that I see with a lot of people. And this is where I have struggled a lot in my own journey with sometimes, and where I used to be really bad at it with, and even when I was, had my bad relapse in 2021, was emotional eating. And this is when, we're dealing with all the emotions of the day. And, food is such a part of our culture where we eat food for everything, right? Like if we're happy and we're having a birthday party, there's food. If we are sad and we're like at a funeral, like we're having food. Like if we are, mad or sad or glad or depressed or whatever things, like we're always having food for everything, right? And so same thing with even like people who are struggling with their emotions just on normal day to day. If you are coming home and you're stressed, or you're angry about something, or you're depressed about something, a lot of times people turn to food as that coping mechanism. And it's almost just used as like to numb that emotion in that moment, right? It's like, I don't want to think about why I'm so upset about everything going on with my life right now. So I just rather, let's just eat all this food, and it'll make it all feel better. You get that dopamine hit. But then, as we all know, after that, you then feel guilty, shameful, and then end up usually restricting after that, and then back to binging. And it's just that endless cycle there. And I always like to use the analogy, and I have to give credit to this to Jared Hamilton, because this is something I always hear him talk about as well. This analogy, you know, let's say like, if your son gets home from school and little Johnny failed his math test today at school and he's really upset, he's crying, he's if he's worried he's going to fail out of school now, and he thinks you're mad at him, and you say, "Well, Johnny, just shut up and go sit in the corner, eat the pack of Oreos." You're probably not going to do that, right? Like
No.
you're gonna say, "Come here and give him a hug. Let's talk through it. Cry it out if you need to. Let's work through these emotions, and you'll get to the compromise at the end." But when you're angry, upset, depressed, whatever it may be, we turn to food to numb our emotions. We are not doing the same as what we would do for somebody else. So that is where a lot of people get stuck, as we end up then turning to food to numb our emotions rather than dealing with them in the first place. And so a couple of strategies that can actually help with that one. This is one I love talking about a lot, is Zen 10. And this is a method that I actually learned from, it's a book called The Binge Code by Ali and Richard Kerr. It's an amazing book. And in the Zen 10 method, it's basically, let's say you're going to have this moment where you're feeling stressed, or whatever the emotion may be, and you're turning to food. You're going to tell yourself Zen 10, and you can say it out loud to have a little more meaning to it, or if you just want to say it in your head, if you're around other people, you can. And in that moment, as soon as you say Zen 10, first you're going to say Zen 10. Secondly, you're going to remove yourself from the food area completely. So get out of the kitchen if the food's in the kitchen. Get away from the buffet line if you're at the buffet. If you're at a party and you're hanging around the table where all the foods and snacks are at, get away from that. If you're at work and you're in the break room where the donuts are at, get out of the break room. Like where you're at, first remove yourself away from that food source. Next, we're going to distract. And this can be done in multiple different ways. Find whatever works best for you, whether it's meditation, breath work, journaling, something more like inner work, figuring out like what the emotions are going through right now. Or maybe it's just like find something to distract you, something on your to-do list for the day. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's listening to music. Maybe it's doing some chores around the house, whatever it may be. But find a way to distract yourself away from that food. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, you have a couple options. You can say, all right, you know what? I was just emotional during that moment. I'm not hungry right now. I was just trying to numb some emotions, but I've worked through them, dealt with them, and I'm not going to have the food. Or maybe you say, all right, I actually am hungry. It's dinner time, but I'm going to actually have an actual meal, a balanced meal of, protein, carbs, and fats, rather than turning to the pint of ice cream in the freezer. Or maybe you say, well, it's not really mealtime. I am really craving that ice cream, but I've worked through my emotions. So I'm going to have one serving of that rather than go ahead first and eating the whole thing. Or last option is maybe you're like, at 10 minutes, you're like, I'm still kind of pondering about this. Give yourself another 10 minutes. Give yourself a little more time.
That's
so
awesome.
that's one strategy I love using and talking through with clients. And another really simple strategy is a lot of times we have like, especially for those listening who are mindless eaters, this is a really good tool to use. Is if you are, wherever your common trigger food is at, let's say, if it's in the fridge, the freezer, the pantry, whatever it may be, get a magnet or something like a sticker or whatever it may be, and put it on that location. So let's say it's ice cream in the freezer. Put a magnet on the freezer, and that way it doesn't have to be like a sticky note that says "Don't binge eat," right? Because like a lot of times this is a very personal subject. You don't want your family seeing you trying to put all these things around the house. Like I understand that. So maybe it's just like a magnet of a lighthouse, something like that. Just something very, whatever it may be, something you find at the store. Throw it up there, and then when you go to get the ice cream, and you're not even thinking about it, you're gonna see the lighthouse and be like, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm emotionally eating right now. I really don't want that ice cream." So you're creating that subconscious thought and now bring it to the conscious forefront. So now you're having a moment to actually think about it and pause for a moment and think about what you're doing and maybe reconsider and make a different option. But those are a couple of strategies there. And just I won't go too much into this because I've been talking for a lot now.
No, you're
But
good.
I earlier I did say I wanted to bring up willpower as well.
Yes, please do.
And this is something where I see a lot of people struggle with. They say, "Oh, I just don't have enough willpower. I wish I had more of willpower." And they're right. Willpower is not unlimited, right? Like I like to look at willpower as like a battery, basically, and it's going to drain throughout the day, and it can drain for many, many things. It's not just about food or exercise or anything like that. It could drain, if your boss is a jerk to you and you use a little willpower, so you don't yell at him. Or maybe it's a little bit of willpower on the way home from work. Somebody cuts you off and, use a little willpower so you don't get road rage, right? Like it could be like these little things, but they're all taking a little bit of that percentage of the battery down, draining it a little bit. And then let's say you get to the end of the day, you get home, your kids are all yelling at you. So you're using a little more willpower so you don't yell back at them, like whatever it may be. And then let's say you walk by the kitchen and there's that pan of brownies sitting there from the weekend when you all had brownies. And you look at it and you're like, oh, no, I'm on a diet. I can't have brownies. So then you keep on moving throughout the day. A little bit later that evening, maybe it's close to dinner time. You walk past them again. You're like, oh, this looks really good. But no, dinner's in an hour. So I'll be good. And then you walk past them after dinner and you're like, no, I'm really on a diet. I should not be having those. And maybe even like peel back the foil a little bit to look at them and you're thinking about cutting yourself one. You're just like, no, stop. Chase, don't do that. I don't need this. So then you push it off again. Well, now your willpower battery is probably like down to 0%, basically. So then it's, 10, 30, 11 o'clock at night. You're walking past it again and you're just like, fuck it. I don't care. And you end up diving headfirst and eating the whole pan of brownies. Whereas you had all these times before where you could have cut a small portion of one slice, one brownie, and had it and probably been just fine with it. But you've kept stressing yourself over this willpower and you've drained it completely to the point where now you have no control at all. And so that's where that comes in. And, one other thing with that is like keep things out of sight, out of mind, right? Like don't leave things sitting on the counter. You have to look at it because every time, even if you may think like I'm fine without those things, every time you walk past them, you're having to make that conscious decision to say no to them. Whether or if it's more of a subconscious even thought. Like, so you're still draining that willpower the more you have to look at them every day.
Yeah. My old boss used to talk about same thing. Willpower is a battery. And he loved like going to like convenience food spots. Like that was his vice. So he would take a different route to work. It would take longer, but he wouldn't have to drive by all the different sub shops and different fast food stops because why would go home when I could just stop here, grab something and go back to work?
Yep. Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely something where out of sight, out of mind. I know in our house right now, like we have some stuff upstairs and every time I walk by it, it's like, it's just on the counter because I made it for my daughter. It's like, I really wanted a piece. I'm limiting myself because one, if I eat all of it, I have to then make more because we're trying not to buy anything. But that it's also like then we'll also be out for her and that'll be an absolute nightmare. So that helps me. But for a lot of people, no. And with that same thing, it doesn't even have to be at the house. I'm sure as a nurse, but I find with nurses and teachers, those two professions, the break rooms.
Oh, it's stocked to the gills.
Yes.
And so with that, I just found myself basically like one of my big rules of thumb was I don't eat things in the break room. Like that was like I just made it a blanket rule for myself. And I know I'm not always a huge proponent of like the black or whites, but like that was one for me that I had a really hard time controlling. And so that was just something where I just told myself, you don't eat things out of the break room unless it's the food you brought with you for lunch. And that way it's just easier just to say no all the time to them rather than trying to make that decision every time.
Yeah. It all the time. Like, they brought brownies into work. They brought
every day.
Aren't you guys supposed to be like health professionals? Like these are the least healthy things being brought in.
Yeah, no, all the time.
Every time it's like, someone brought in like a whole thing of donuts. Like, what? No wonder all of you are struggling.
Yeah,
every day you're walking by that. Like every day you have delicious food in front of your face, and like, yeah, that's challenging. That's draining your willpower. If you have a stressful job, which anything in the healthcare profession or teaching is very stressful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy to give in. It's easy to burn up all your willpower really quick.
Yep, for sure.
So we are starting to run out of time. We still got a little bit of time left, but another thing you wrote is about striving for new goals. So everyone's goal is always, I want to lose weight. But what do you mean by like striving for new goals? Is this like new weight loss goals? Is this doing things outside of weight loss? I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah. So it can be both, right? Like I feel like that's something where it just depends on like where you're at in your journey, right? I'm sure you've talked about on the show before where we can't lose weight all year round. Like there's times we have to go to maintenance and such. So your listeners know about that. So like when we say that, like so the next time you go into a fat loss phase, maybe there is more weight you want to lose. Or maybe we choose to do something different. There's another goal. Maybe it's like I want to go to run a certain distance. Maybe it's I want to lift a certain amount of weight. Like I'll just use myself for example. There's been times when I went through weight loss and then it was just like, hey, I just want to just feel better and look better. There was times when I had like an aesthetic goal basically where it's like I just want to cut as low as I could. There was a time when I was got into running during the pandemic when I couldn't go to the gym. It's like, hey, I want to run as long as I can. I got to running like 11, 12 miles. And so like there was that phase and then, then it went to strength training and powerlifting now. So like I think it's always important to shift your goals to something else because the moment you don't have a goal, and it doesn't only have to be a big goal, but the moment you just like let go of your goals all completely is when you start being a lot more lackadaisical of like, I don't have anything I'm working on right now. Like I can have the brownies, I can have the donut at work. Like I'm not trying to lose weight, I'm not trying to get stronger. I'm just kind of living life right now, which is okay. But I think it's always important to have some sort of goal, even if it's to tell yourself my goal is to maintain my current weight.
Yes.
Setting some sort of goal for yourself is important all the time,
I
short term
fa-
and long term.
I found the times where I've been the worst off with my nutrition and my fitness goals have been those times where I don't set any real goals. Like it's just like,
Yep.
I'm just gonna work out. And
Yep.
then it's like, okay, I'm gonna just do the fun stuff. I'm skipping this stuff that I probably should do more, like mobility training and cardio, because I really
Yep.
like strength training because my background is bodybuilding and powerlifting. So it's like I like to do that stuff.
Yep.
No cardio. And then the diet. And then it's like, I'm not really feeling motivated to do it. Well, you're not chasing anything.
Yep.
I've talked a couple times of like we do that when clients graduate our program is like map out what the next year will look like for them. And
Yep.
obviously it's like there's nuance, it can change, but as a standard plan. And I've gone over on the show a couple times of how I plan out my year because as you can see behind me, big into hunting. So hunting is a very set time. It starts in September for me and runs until January. So during that time, that's my maintenance phase. Like I might get to the gym 3 times a week during that time, running business, trying to do that, doing everything else, being a dad. Okay, that's a great time for maintenance or building muscle. Then it's fat loss phase in like January up until like March or April, which is I ended in April or early May this year. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to focus on building strength and endurance going to hunting season. And then there's my year. Like that's how I map out my year. So I'm always chasing some sort of goal. But I think a lot of people are just like, okay, I lose weight and then I'm done.
Yep. Yep. Always chase the next goal. Always have something in mind. I always tell people when you're done climbing the mountain and you come back down the mountain, like, look, where's the next mountain? Are you heading up?
Yeah. What hobby are you going to get into? So I've had many clients like they got into strongman competitions because my old boss was a strongman competitor. So a
Nice.
couple got into that. A couple of them got into Olympic lifting competitions. A couple got into powerlift, like or running. Like they became runners,
Yep.
and now they're doing 5, 10Ks, half marathons, marathons. Like find something you want to go do, and maybe it's no, you want to just like hike. I have clients who like I struggle to hike more than like 4 miles or
Mhm.
have any elevation. There's this 8 mile hike I want to do with like 2,000 feet of elevation gain.
Mhm.
Okay, let's train you for that and stay in shape for that. That's an awesome goal.
Mhm. Exactly.
All right, Chase. Well, anything you want to wrap up with? Anything you want to leave the audience with here?
I think it's just, guys, like just, and not to repeat myself, but just play the long game. Like, just like do this, find something you enjoy, have fun with this. Fitness is not supposed to take over your entire life. Nutrition is not supposed to take over your entire life. Like, there is that balance. And I'm not even a huge fan of the word balance, but like, there is that balance though of like being able to enjoy your life. Like, unless you're stepping on a bodybuilding stage or unless you're trying to compete in something, like know that you can enjoy life and still be healthy as well.
Awesome. Okay. So one last question. This is something new I'm going to be doing with every episode because obviously I'm huge into the outdoors. So you said one of your things you like to do is hiking. So what is like your favorite outdoor memory or favorite hike to do?
Oh man. Oh, let's see here. I would say my favorite hiking memory was probably more of a mental battle than it was physical. Out in when I did a travel nursing job in Colorado, I hiked. I'm sure you're familiar with 14ers.
Yes.
So I hiked. It's called the DeCalibron Loop, and it was
Okay.
4 14ers in one day. About 7.5, 8 hours of hiking. And it was straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down for 4 peaks. And it was my first 14er as well. So I did 4 for the first time. And actually I did it with another nutrition coach I had met on Instagram. We had talked for a while and I'd had her on my podcast and I'd gotten to know her, but the first time I actually got to meet her in person was when we went and did this hike with her and our friends. And it was definitely a mental battle and hardest thing I've ever done. But so well worth it.
That is an awesome story. I love. We're just gonna do not 1/1400 for them in one day for the first time ever. That's awesome. Don't totally
Yep.
something I would do too. Like, yeah, my wife hates it. Like, what are we gonna do? Easy hike. 10 miles later, like if
Yeah.
you ever saw the memes, it's like the was it the there's the one that was going around like me telling my wife it's gonna be easy 8 miles in.
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
that's me. She is now checks all trails every time we go hiking. Okay, awesome. So, Chase, where can people find you?
Yeah. So the easiest place to find me is either Instagram at changing_chase. I have a podcast as well, Chasing Health Podcast, or they can come join our Facebook group, which links in the bio and Instagram, but it's called Freedom from Bad Diets, Conquering Your Mindset and Metabolism.
Awesome. And that will all be down in the show notes, guys. So make sure to go check Chase out. Thank you for coming on today.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into today's episode. Make sure to check Chase out. And while you're at it, make sure to leave a 5-star review and actually write a review as well, as that helps other people find the show. Check out down below in the show notes. We have our 5-day faster fat loss course available. Not this week, but coming up Friday's episode, there's also going to be a free rucking guide for those of you who are hunters. We're going to be launching that. Version 3 of that rucking program is going to be coming out on Friday. It's super simple. If you don't know what that is, that'll be on Friday's episode. We are also looking for bring on some clients in July. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching with Peak Wellness Coaching, the company I run, make sure to check out that link down below as well.